What's bonkin', everybody, and welcome to Take Your Time, a Persona 5 podcast where we play Persona 5 Royal in real time, along with the real calendar dates. In-game calendar dates? I don't remember what I said. It's been a wild week, y'all. I'm Tom Marks, joined as always by Jonathan Dornbush. Jonathan, how are you?
I mean, we just started doing the show,
Yeah.
and, you know, we're going to be going through a pretty quick week. Not much happened, so I think we'll be able to...
I like to think that one of the things people like about this show is how consistently inconsistent it is.
We're going to hit our stride in episode 45. I can feel it.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking forward to that.
As the year ends. Yeah. No, we've got a big ol' show today. It is, of course, National Pancake Week. Hooray! Pancakes. We're going to talk about some pancakes this week.
I really should have had just like a plate of pancakes to eat throughout this episode.
Yeah.
Just slowly chomped away.
We've got a big episode. We've got to get through 3 days of free time, but then we also have the end of Sainijima's Palace where we're doing the boss fight, then the Great Betrayal, and then the Great Revival, and boy, it's just a lot of exposition at the end of this week, but also a lot of stuff happens, and I'm so excited to get into it because we can stop dancing around the fact that our boyfriend is evil.
How could this have happened, Tom?
I know, it's tragic. But yeah, this is a good week, right? This is a fun, wild week. We get the payoff. We get caught up in the timeline of like where the beginning of the game happened. It's awesome.
Before we get into it, just to say, like, obviously you and I have both played through this part of the game before, so we knew this was all coming. I will say, like, I remembered very key moments of it, but getting to go through it again was still super exciting and super great. Like, it doesn't lose its luster, at least the second time. Maybe the third time you were just, you know, on Twitter the whole time. But it was still so enthralling and just such a fun reveal. And I also think seeing it again really helped me, like, piece together some stuff I didn't quite land on the first time. So that's why I'm also excited to talk through, especially for people who are going through the first time who maybe still could be a bit lost, because it is a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. I mean, like, there is a reason that basically all of November 21st is, like, just explanation of what just happened.
Yeah.
Right? But before we get there, we are doing November 15th to November 21st, but we've got a pop quiz question to answer from last week. Last week, I presented a gamble of sorts in honor of Sainijima's Palace, saying that you could either try to guess all 3 correct answers, but if you get one wrong, you get them all wrong. Of course, that was all nonsense and overcomplicated, and that's fine. But the questions were, here are 3 items, treasures. Which one of these treasures costs the most? Which one of these treasures costs the least? And which one isn't from Sai's Palace at all? And the options were gray cufflinks, precious bill, and faded silk hat. And while you give me what you thought your answer was, I'm going to go turn off my heater because it just turned on and it's really loud.
So he's not even going to hear my answer. Then I'm giving my answer. Everyone at home, just say I was correct. Whatever happens, just tell Tom I got it right.
That was correct.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yes. He played right into my hand. Yes. Much like a shadow in a palace, I have fooled you. My poor
Sorry about
simpleton.
that. So what type of gamble did you want to take here?
I mean, I have to go all in and assume
okay.
I know all 3.
Yeah.
My computer's being a little funny, so I don't want to look directly at the run of show in case tabbing over freaks it out. So forgive. What is the 3rd item?
So there's gray cufflinks, precious bill, and faded silk hat.
Okay. I'm going to say the faded silk hat was the most, because that would be weird.
Okay.
The gray cufflinks don't exist, and the precious bill is fake for this palace.
The gray cufflinks don't exist?
Sorry. The gray cufflinks aren't from this palace.
Okay, and the precious bill is the least?
Is the least. I said the same thing twice for those last 2. I'm tired, Tom.
Okay,
the precious bill is the least. There we go.
So nobody in the comments got it right.
Okay.
That is also incorrect.
Yeah, that seems right.
But like Sainijima's Palace, it was rigged from the start!
What did you do? What did you do, Tom?
The most expensive item is the gray cufflinks.
Okay.
the least expensive item is the precious bill. And the item not from Sai's Palace is also the precious bill.
I had a feeling. Is that from Kaneshiro?
Yeah, it was from Kaneshiro.
Okay. It felt familiar, but not to size. So, yeah.
I never said that you couldn't pick the same one twice. Ooh.
Get out of here.
See? I will win at any cost.
We're going to steal your treasure and not care about what happens in the battle. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you for everyone who did submit questions. It's funny, because of the answers I saw submitted on YouTube, Faded Silk Hat was like, people thought that was the most expensive one across the board. So you're not alone there.
So I think the problem is I'm thinking about your logic less than the game's logic. And saying Faded Silk Hat implies to me that you're trying to make us think it's not worth a lot, but it is.
Gotcha.
But the game isn't trying to pull one over on us, so of course it's not the most expensive. So I was there's two layers of logic to continue.
Yeah, I get that. It's a complicated game, but you did not manage to avoid ruin. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm used to it.
Moving on, we did have one comment I wanted to read it to from last week's episode on the Dornology YouTube channel, which was from Ben, who says, it sounds like you hit, in reference to last week with the calling card and people not showing up for you, Jonathan. He says, sounds like you hit one of the weirder interactions with palace schedules and confidants this week. If you complete an infiltration route for a palace, but then wait to send the calling card, all confidants who are party members are completely unavailable to hang out until the calling card is sent, or in this case, until you try to send the calling card and get told not to. So that is the case, is that you can't hang out with people if you're in that in-between. I thought it was just maybe if you hadn't completed the palace, but if you're in the in-between, and so if you have the burden of knowing that you can't send the calling card yet, you just get screwed.
Wow. Man. Thanks, game. Come on. Well, yeah, that makes sense and does make me feel a little bit better about the idea that it wasn't like suddenly everyone just didn't want to hang out with Joker. Right. It was just, you didn't do the thing the game thought you would do, which makes sense.
Speaking of free time, we do have 3 days to get through, so we're going to start on November 15th. Jonathan, what'd you do on November 15th?
Tom, I thought I would take my time and really dig into every single bit of conversation between the people I hung out with for these 3 days.
That's interesting.
I hung out with Haru during the day and then Chihaya in the evening.
Nice.
Yeah.
Actually, I did the same. So we had a quiz in class about like parading villains through the street, which that comes up later, doesn't it?
I do like the teacher seemed upset that there weren't historical dramas on TV anymore and was somehow blaming the Phantom Thieves. And, like, TV production doesn't work that quickly. There's no way they wouldn't have not, like, had TV shows in production because of the Phantom Thieves a couple months ago.
Yeah, but also, like, spring onions don't grow that quickly, so what is Haru doing?
Plant drugs.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Yeah, so I did kind of the same thing. I leveled Haru. Yes. I think I got her up to 8 now, so I'm, like, really close to maxing her out.
Wow.
And then in the evening, I maxed Chihaya, so I'm now done with Chihaya.
Nice.
Yeah. November 16th, we had some slacking off time in class.
And I made lockpicks, because boy, do I have nothing useful to do in class anymore.
I slept.
Okay.
Fun fact, apparently sleeping doesn't only get you confidant points, it also can get you social stat points. So I got some knowledge.
How useful. What a great time for that. Yeah, I just made a couple extra lockpicks because I figured eventually for mementos I might as well stock up.
Yeah, you gotta get that. The unbreakable pick. What's it called again?
Oh yeah, I did. Is that new to Royal? I meant to ask.
No, it's not.
Okay, so I just didn't notice it the first time around because I saw that and was like, oh my god. But yeah,
it doesn't call much attention to it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Perma pick. That's what it was.
Thank you. Yes, that's correct. And then during the day I hung out with An to get her to rank 8 because wow, have I neglected An this time around. And then I hung out with Akechi.
Cool. You just hung out with Akechi?
This was just a hang.
Amazing.
Even though I had gotten him to rank 8.
Cool.
I thought I needed to still, so I hung out with Akechi. It was not a useful night, but
Cool.
Yeah.
I love it. No, that sounds like a useful night to me.
Yeah.
One thing I will say too is we're going to talk about Maruki and Akechi's Confidant lines a little bit more in detail this week because, as you've seen from playing, some stuff happens this week if you have already, like, they're have a cutoff this week, so we can talk about those a little. That day I actually went to Mementos. I had no one to hang out with during the day, and I had Futaba and Oya's, Mementos request. So I just was like, sure, and I, made $1 million and finished up the stamps in an area and finished their Mementos request and got to level 60 and moved on, and I was like, great, sure, fine.
Nice.
It wasn't a long Mementos trip, but it was a productive one.
You do what you gotta do.
And then in the evening, I maxed Hifumi.
Cool.
So in the evenings, I literally only have EY and Oya now to hang out with.
Nice.
And then November 17th, we'll just blaze right through. You can read on the train. Not that that matters to either of us.
I read about planetariums because I forgot I had that book. So finally I opened that big Space Needle that isn't the Space Needle.
Nice. I read about how to factorize better, and so I'm better at studying now.
Congrats.
Isn't that great?
Good job. Finally.
We got a question about graphs that I know it's a busy week, but I really did want to take a moment for this one because there was a graph question.
Before the show, Tom was like, we are going to speed through these 3 days so we can get to the meat of the...
Listen, this is important, okay? Mm-hmm, so it shows you a graph and it says what type of graph is it, and the choices are the devil's curve, a cochleoid, which is the correct answer, and then the last one is an S-car graph because it looks like a snail shell. And I looked at the answers of, like, what people picked. Yeah. And I guess we're at the point in the game where most people are maxed on knowledge and they just don't give a shit which ones they're selecting. Yeah. Because 11% of people picked an S-car graph, and I love every single one of them.
Those 11% are my heroes because, absolutely at this point, pick the bad answer because it's funny. Yeah.
My, completionist brain will never let me do that, but I respect the people who do.
Yeah, I get that.
Then, we do have a little bit of a story thing where Kasumi joins you for lunch, and you have basically just a chat about how she sympathizes with what you're going through. She's hearing terrible things about the Phantom Thieves, but she's like, she still cares about you, and she asks you if you still have to do stuff as the Phantom Thieves, and you're like, yeah, I got one more thing I gotta do. And she's like, okay, well, be careful. And she makes you promise that you'll go have fun together, do something fun after everything settles down.
Which was really nebulous and weird to me. That's not normally how I tell a friend I want to hang out with them later. It's like, hey, we should go have fun sometime soon.
Yeah.
But, they are leading strange lives. Obviously, not to spoil too much, but just as this is the first time I went through this, I did appreciate the scene being here because obviously we need to pay off a little bit more of her being in Sai's palace.
Yes.
Later on, because we had that in the beginning, and obviously that was a very cool way to introduce her when you didn't know who she was at the beginning of this game. But I think had this scene not existed, it would have still felt a little bit out of place, even though we've gotten to know her and been in the metaverse with her and everything. It still would have not felt just totally purposeful for her to be there. So
the funny thing, and I was going to bring this up later, but the funny thing about that scene too, in the intro, is that the first time you're playing it and you don't know who she is, it's like, don't forget the promise we made, okay? And she makes it a really big deal out of it. Yeah. And then now, 10 months later or whatever, we realize that the promise was let's go do something fun.
Let's hang out.
And then in the palace, she's like, you promised. It's like,
don't forget what you said. To go have fun?
Yeah, make it sound like it's going to be such a big deal, and then it's like, I hastily made promise the day before to go to a movie, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, did we promise to be betrothed? What happened here? Now we're just gonna go play billiards, I guess, again. So, whatever. But no, yeah, it helps set that up a little bit more because there had been so little Kasumi for a little bit. Really since the school festival. So this at least just kind of anchored that appearance. In a way that I appreciated. But yeah,
it reconnects her to the story too in that moment because she'd been kind of out of it for a little while.
Yeah, which is fair. A lot's been happening.
Yeah. Then what did you do during the day? Because we just have our last free day today.
Yes, I hung out with Futaba just to get some points up, and then I got Oya to rank 6.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you?
So it's a good thing I went to Mementos the day before, because today I leveled Futaba and then leveled Oya, who were my two people that were gated off.
Nice.
So I'm continuing that along, and then we hit November 18th, which is the day we got to send the calling card. But before that, some stuff happens. You run into Maruki in the hallway, and he says, "Hey, let's get lunch." And then there's a student assembly where everyone is saying goodbye to Maruki, and he's saying goodbye and being adorable and bumping his head into the microphone.
What a buffoon, but we love him.
Yeah. I really do like this scene because it shows how much of an impact he's had on the entire school, right?
Yeah.
Where there was this exact scene at the beginning when he first showed up and he was speaking to the student body, but he was like a total, like, klutz, and, like, you didn't know what to make of it, and none of the students were really sure about him. And now, 6 months later, he is, he's won everyone over, and they're all gonna miss him when he leaves. It's
his klutziness gets a standing ovation, basically, is like the change that has happened. Yeah, it's it's a nice reflection of his path and everything. Also, like, a lot of the student body definitely thinks he's hot, right?
I think that is the implication.
Okay,
yes.
just double checking. But yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't blame him, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, so that happens, and then you end up getting lunch with Maruki. And he buys you super fancy tempura bowls. And talks to you about how he's finished his research paper, there was a name. The name of the research paper was something I was almost going to use for a quiz and then didn't.
You look that up.
I found it.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Interpreting reality through cognitive science and the alteration of reality via external influence.
That's almost as laboriously titled as the way I introduced this show. Yeah, while you took those notes, I just want to reflect my notes for this encounter. Very expensive tempura bowls. He's wearing sandals to school? What the hell? That's what I wrote down of import. So while you were copying that information, I was like, why is he wearing sandals?
Amazing.
But anyway, yes.
Yeah, so he's finished his research paper thanks to you. To be clear, I think this is a scene that only triggers if you have gotten Maruki to 9. Because this is also the scene that gets him to 10, to max rank.
Yeah.
I guess... also...
I was going to just say, for anyone who's listening who hasn't maxed him out, which you should have, right? I guess if you didn't, tell us what happened, but...
yeah, I believe just nothing happens. And also, if you didn't max him out by this date, I believe you also don't get the whole final royal stuff.
So you should probably do that. That's wild. Yeah. That's just so wild.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So, yeah, he says that. Also, as is the custom with max rank 10 things, he knows you're a Phantom Thief. Oh, my goodness. And also, something I thought was really interesting is he's known you're a Phantom Thief since the very beginning.
Yeah,
right?
Since April.
He said he saw you and basically the first time that An went into a palace accidentally with you, he saw all three of you coming out.
Yeah.
And was so excited because he'd wanted to look into cognitive science, but he didn't really have anybody, like, he know where to start. And so basically the last few months he wanted to talk to you specifically because he knew you were a Phantom Thief and wanted to get your ideas about changing someone's cognition, basically, as is his research.
So he's
which
either...
is a really interesting revelation.
Yeah, he's either an accidentally great therapist and just a great researcher, or both. But
right.
Yeah, it's really funny, and this was wild, especially seeing it for the first time. I do think it's amusing because you were saying, obviously, like, you know, as with every rank 10, they're like, and of course your life as a Phantom Thief. Not going, like, I just assumed this scene was just going to be a scene of us talking before the big stuff happened.
Yeah.
And so when he says that, I was like, oh, we're there, I guess. And I loved that it was just that, because it was... Normally you initiate those conversations where someone else came to you for this one, which I appreciated.
Yeah. And so we haven't talked about Maruki's specific Confidant path very much, and we're not going to get into it. It's too big of a day to get into every little detail. But that does go along with, right, the last 9 Confidant things. As you've been hanging out with him, he's been asking you your thoughts on just kind of like very nebulous subjects with research. And then you find out that at some point, that he had this great tragedy, right, where his fiance had like, I can't remember the specifics, had like a death in the family, like her parents died or something like that, and it like left her completely mentally scarred. And like the reason he's doing all his research is because he was trying to figure out like, well, if you can heal someone a mental wound in the same way that you heal a physical wound, wouldn't that be such a great revelation? Is basically his driving motivation.
Yes.
And talking to you allowed him to like figure out more of what that means in some sense.
Yeah. No, I appreciated that sort of revelation about things because, yeah, as you said, we can go through it at a later date, but, like, it's been hinted at, obviously, that there were some issues with him and a romantic partner and whatnot, and his striving for this interest in the field. To have that a bit more clearly laid out, I think also gives it a bit of a more humanized reason. Like, obviously, I think you can say there's a lot of cliche for like someone wanting to save a romantic partner, like that is often a trope in storytelling, but I think getting that sense of that's why he's been digging into this stuff so much, and seems to now have a very great understanding of it.
Right.
It makes it very important for his personal journey as well, which I appreciated.
So we got 10 with Maruki. Hooray. Let's go fight a boss.
Yeah.
Because this day is packed. So you all kind of gather up at the hideout to talk about sending the calling card. You decide that Makoto should send the calling card because it's easiest, right? Then there's another one of those like foggy moments with the team minus Akechi. Oh, I wonder why. We find out about that later, of course.
Tom, don't spoil things. Come on.
And then Makoto gives Sai the calling card, and Sai gets angry and goes rah 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 rah, and then it works.
Yes. Congrats. I do. Just speaking of that, though, you talking about that scene, I do just want to layer a cliffhanger in the midst of this episode. There was a conversation or a moment I pointed out when I was hosting one of the episodes a few weeks ago, and I very much pointed it out, not realizing it would be important during the scene because I forgot it was important. What that scene was, what it was all about, and why I goofed, you'll find out later in the episode. Tom, back to you.
Okay. That evening, though, we have a free evening within LeBlanc. So I just worked out because
nice.
Running out of things to do at this point.
I made curry. Never hurts to have more SP. So yeah,
cool.
Did that.
Yeah. I think that's
that day.
That's that day.
Yeah.
So let's get to the next day. You kind of meet up to talk about, all right, we're ready to go. And then you go into the palace. You do the boss fight. And the boss fight, it's funny. It's kind of a nice change of pace from the last couple, which have had like big like levels after you enter the palace to go to the boss, where this one is just like, go to the boss.
Yep. And this one's, the boss itself is largely unchanged from my memory from the base game, right?
Think so. I don't remember this boss super well, but I don't remember this being very different.
Yeah, that central mechanic in terms of the ball spinning around and whatnot is very much what I remember.
Well, what do you make of this boss? Do you like it? Do you not like it?
Well, so we were talking a little bit before the show of like, thank God it was a relatively simple boss, so we don't have to spend too much of the show, going super deep. But I do appreciate it for the simplicity here because it is a very smart restraint moment by the developers because there is so much story that is about to take place, and you in the back of your head know you're about to get to the point at the beginning of the game that they could have made this a very laborious or very complex fight, and it might have been cool, but they want you to get to the part that matters most to them. And so I think sacrificing the complexity of this boss to make it a little simpler so that you can get to that stuff makes this boss better in that respect. It doesn't obviously like make the fight more interesting in any way, but I appreciated the fact that it was like, once you kind of figure out what you need to do with the roulette, which if you're coming in knowing it's very quick, and like I was able to do it in one turn. I think the first time I played I messed up once or twice, but like once you get into it, it's just a pretty quick fight. Yeah.
And who'd you go with party wise?
I stuck with, it was Akechi, Morgana, An, and myself.
Okay, so I did the same, but Makoto instead of An.
Cool.
Because I wanted to make her fight her sister.
That's my girlfriend was like, why aren't you having Makoto fight? And I was like, because we're dating and I don't want her to have to go through that. I am trying to protect her.
Amazing. Yeah, the fight is obviously has two phases, right? It's got the first kind of sort of roulette phase, which is not even a fight, right? You literally can't attack, or else you'll just get smacked back. And you're sort of placing... I really like it thematically, even though the bets don't, like, really matter, right? It's fun the first time when you don't fully understand that yet. And then you send someone off. I sent Morgana off to go break the glass case that's over... the glass lid that's over the slot that's stopping you from winning.
Yeah.
And that makes Sai go, no! And then she turns into her true form, which is very funny to me because, like, all the true form enemies are, like, usually still related to them in some way, and then Sai is just, like, a terrifying monster with a chainsaw arm and a gun.
Yeah, I guess I could explain it away in terms of, like, she's become so distorted, whereas the other people, like, of all the palace fights that we've had, because, you know, even with Futaba, we weren't fighting Futaba, we were fighting the distortion of Wakaba. And so I think it's the idea of, like, a good person being distorted so much that they become something just completely unrecognizable is how I describe it. But it's not stated that way, at least as far as I know.
And then that second phase of the fight is an actual fight. The roulette spins and picks an element, and then that's the element that she uses, and then also she'll be resistant to everything except for the element that usually would weaken that one, right? Yeah. So, like, for me, she picked Sai, and then
Sai.
And then I could use Makoto's nuke to kind of hit the most damage in. And it's kind of a simple fight, right?
Yeah.
You just sort of, like, peck at her, and she'll peck at you, and you just stay alive, and it's not, like, very complex, but also it's just, like, a fine little boss fight.
Just a couple of birds pecking away. Yeah, I think I got lightning first, and then fire was what it spun to at some point. And yeah, it was pretty much just chipping away. What was fun was I took your advice, and I forget what the item is, but I put whatever item on Joker, or I have a power that essentially deflects all attacks of a certain kind. So at least, like, the first attack with each power just reflected back at her, and it did nothing on Joker. So, like, it was a very low stakes fight for me. It really was just waiting until she was dead. But yeah.
I at one point got Futaba used the ability that gives everyone charge and focus, right?
Oh, nice.
Or charge and concentrate. So it was just, like, a round of everyone's damage being doubled, and I was like, cool.
We're good.
You know, like, that sped things up.
Not too worried, then. Yeah.
But you know, it's a fun fight. It's not like anything major. And like you said, I think it is that way so that you can get to the story stuff afterwards quicker.
Yeah.
I think that's good, kind of a good sense of that. So then what happens is Yusuke and Ryuji... Makoto talks to Sai's shadow. Yusuke and Ryuji conspicuously walk off camera and then come back with a briefcase that supposedly has the treasure in it. And then... Futaba detects lots of enemies coming in, and so you have to split up. So they give the briefcase to Joker, and then they split up, and you are now in the sequence at the beginning of the game, right? Except you know who everyone is, and you know what's going on, and you run and escape the palace, and have this moment with Arsene, basically being like, don't sell out your friends, don't be a narc.
Yeah.
And then you have to take that advice later, or else you lose the game.
And I kept trying to sell them out, and it just wouldn't let me. I kept being like, you dirty animals, you're... No, I did just want to say, in terms of this replaying, because it is now the 4th time I've played, I guess the 6th time you have, it is like, and I don't usually use this turn of phrase, but it is so hype. Like, the when you're in it and you know you've gone through it all, and, like, I kind of respect the fact that they just make you play through all of it again. Like, it doesn't do a sped up version of it. You have to play through all again. Yeah. And it's just this really great sequence.
Even the fight.
Yeah. And now that you know everything and you're going through all of it, and it's like, okay, yeah, all of this matters so much more. And especially then knowing everything I know that is going to take place after makes it even more exciting, of just this, like, okay, yeah, we're getting into it. This is happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I don't know about you, but, like, at this point for me, it's 95 hours into the game of playtime, right?
I weirdly am not. I'm at like 85. I don't know how I've sped through the game so much, but it's not been taking me as long as I thought it was.
Cool. Well,
anyway.
Still.
But yes, it's been a lot of time.
It's been nearly 100 hours of gameplay since you saw that sequence, right?
Yeah.
And for us, it's been literally 6 months or whatever, 7 months. So it's been a while.
And what's really funny is I am a huge proponent of whenever a movie replays a scene from earlier in the movie, I'm like, stop it. You don't need to do that. That was an hour and a half ago. That is dumb. Don't just replay 30 seconds of the movie. We know what happened. It's more emotional if you don't put it. But here, because of the fact that it has been that time, I do think replaying through it makes it so much more impactful.
Yeah.
And I dig it.
So you run through, it reteaches you how to hide.
Thank God. You know?
You get that moment with Kasumi again, which is even more hype to see her flipping around with that gun and doing all that cool stuff, because now you actually know who she is. And it's funny too, because I said way back at the beginning of this podcast, I think that adding that scene to that opening sequence weakens the opening sequence the first time you play through it, and it absolutely elevates it the second time you play through it.
It's so cool this time. Yeah, I think the first time I was so absorbed in just who is this person? Oh, what is what's our relationship and everything? But here is she's just being awesome.
Well, sorry, excuse me. I meant first time if you've never played the game.
Yes, before. I totally understand, and I totally get where you're coming from on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, go through the opening. Oh no, you get caught. Oh no, they say you've been sold out. I wonder by who. And that's November 19th. That's all of the 19th.
That's
and
the
now
day.
We jump to the 20th without choice. You've been getting interrogated and beaten.
I did on the 19th just write down. I do think it's funny because obviously at the end of the game, we've done some of those things. So as you were saying, it's funny that we redo the fight and everything. But it does pause also where they want you to sign. They do go through that scene still where it's a really big deal, but it was just where you had to pick your name in the beginning of the game. But now it's we want you to sign your name as a confession, and it pauses for a minute. It's okay, yeah, you know your name. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the 20th.
So, yeah, it does that whole stuff. It does the interrogation scene. Sai fights her way back into the interrogation room, and now you're caught up. And now officially there's no more this is all you retelling the story. It's literally Sai even says something so that's how you ended up here, right? And suddenly we're in line.
Well, and even the when you're in the Velvet Room for a minute, the twins also are and now we're in the present. And there's just something really satisfying about that moment of we all of this has been a recount of what has happened to us. It has not been the actual in real time.
Yes. So Sai offers you a deal. Mm-hmm. The deal is I'm going to list a bunch of names. You tell me if they were parts of the Phantom Thieves, and if you do, maybe you won't get the death penalty, is basically how it goes.
Yeah.
She lists all of your co-conspirators, and you're given 3 choices of either no, never heard of them, or yep, those are all of my accomplices. And if you pick those are all of my accomplices, you just lose the game. I think you might be given a second option, to be are you sure sort of thing.
It does. I picked it out of curiosity this time because I, obviously didn't the first time around, but I did pick it just to see what would happen. And he goes is this really what I should be doing to my friends? But yeah.
It really doesn't want you to, but it does give you that option. And yeah, if anybody is curious, literally if you pick this option and you do that, Akechi just comes in and shoots you and you just lose and the credits roll. It is legitimately just an end of the game.
It's like a Far Cry 5 opening if you just sit there and wait. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But you can also just reload or whatever. It's not
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, you don't want to sell out your friends. Even though, again, in the telling of this story, you named all of these people, right? She knew Makoto.
Uh-huh.
She knew the daughter of Wakaba Ishiki. You've named all of these people
I'm not going to sell them out, Tom. I'm not going to let you know who was part of the Phantom Thieves. I'm just telling you all of the people around my story while I was a Phantom Thief.
But, I don't
yes,
get this one.
Yeah. It's
There are some things that I nitpick in this game of like, I don't get it. Why is it like this? And it's like just me being nitpicky. This
Sure.
is one of those moments where it's like, wait, we've told her all of this.
Yeah, we laid it out pretty openly. I think like I don't know the differences between the justice systems in America and Japan, and I'm not even going to pretend to. But I just I do wonder if him needing to like clearly explicitly confirm these things as true would be necessary here. Not that like,
I guess, but even her whole like interrogation is like formality, right? Because she's been taken off the case. So
yes,
it's just
yeah.
like for her own insight. I don't know.
It's
anyway,
for her to know. But
we don't have time to nitpick. You start to realize that there's something you have to do with Sai, that you've forgotten parts, and that's what those fuzzy bits are. And we get our first moment of rehearing, not the full thing, but Morgana saying it was when he mentioned pancakes. And that's when we get our first mention of pancakes of the week.
Yeah, I do think it, because I normally don't love when stories withhold information from the viewer, or player in this case, that the character you are seeing the story through has that information. I don't think that leads to, that doesn't make as much for a clever reveal. That just makes for a thing they withheld. Whereas here, there is at least they mention it many times of that you've been drugged, and so the fact that you've been recounting the story, you forgot things, and so that works here in a way that I don't mind.
Yeah, and you're starting to get your memory back as the drug is wearing off.
Yes,
right?
yeah. Which is why such a good long interrogation very much helped here.
Yeah. So eventually, basically, what you realize is she asks if Akechi is your. This is a moment I like. Is she asks if Akechi is one of your your members, and you say he's not a teammate, right? And she goes, "Oh, okay." And then when you have to tell her, you realize you have to convince her to show Akechi your phone, and so you tell her to show Akechi your phone. You convince her to do so. She leaves. Akechi comes in. She shows Akechi your phone, and there's kind of one of those pulses of going into the metaverse. And then they pass by each other. Akechi steals the guard's gun, shoots the guard in the back, puts a silencer on it really fast, by the way. He's a pro.
Yeah.
And then shoots Joker in the head. And you lose, and that's the end of the game.
Yeah. Well, Tom, it's been a good run. I appreciate all your work together. And
no, it was fun while it lasted.
Yeah. We'll see you next time. Nice to steal you.
No, you get obviously that is not the end of the game. Akechi goes back out and reports on the phone to his boss, who is, it's Shido. It's been Shido all along. And he says, basically, the job's done. Shido gets mad at him for naming him. He says, we can make the SIU director have a disease or some sort of sickness too. And then immediately you see the SIU director have a mental shutdown and die.
It happens real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Akechi on the phone also mentions that the rest of the Phantom Thieves, once things calm down, they can all be met with unfortunate accidents, right? So their lives are at risk in the future.
And what's interesting is he's also kind of we don't have to worry about them banding together. Once we kill their leader, we don't need, to be concerned that someone else is going to rise and take his place.
Right. Then you get a scene of Sai with the phone, right? Basically being getting instructions from Futaba on the phone that she has to go, that the guard is in on it, and Akechi was gonna go there to kill him, and she has to go save Joker. So she does all of that, and you get a very funny Velvet Room scene, too, at some point in the mix here, where Igor is just so it seems you have died. And, obviously, this whole thing is a plot.
Yeah.
And I remember it all, so I don't remember how much of this is, not made clear until the next day. But it's clear that, the version of you that was killed was, was the shadow version, basically.
Yeah, so I will say I was trying to keep as many notes as possible on what was what day. For the vast majority of, the actual telling, it's all saved for the day after. But like for the purposes of our discussion, like things kind of blur because we're talking about it as it happened, and then the next day is essentially a recap of everything that happened. But wait, there's more, and
it's not worth us going through every point that they learned in the order they learned it.
Exactly, yeah.
But before we get into the details of the next day, let's talk about Akechi real quick.
Yeah.
Man, you know what one of my favorite moments this week and during this whole sequence is when Sai passes Akechi in the hall, and then Akechi's face immediately goes to that evil smile where he's like, just looks like a different character all of a sudden, and you're like, so good. Oh no.
Yep, yeah. He's bad. Yeah. And then just to like not just jumping around a little bit, is this where her final persona or like our final moment with her happens as well?
Sai?
Yeah.
Sai maxes out,
or
yeah. Sai maxes out in the thing.
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
She maxes out in the interrogation room.
Okay, right. Yeah, because I had just like the final persona. I do think it's very funny that the final persona of the judge arc is Satan.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I like the back and forth, and I think the revelations of these characters, not just to us, but like to each other. Like, you know, seeing his face change like that for our benefit, but also Sai learning about all these things of some suspicions that she's had all along, but because you could argue her heart has become so clouded and so focused on you know, being correct and winning in this case, that she's let some of that stuff slide, where it's like Sai is a good enough investigator that she probably should have noticed these things, but she was getting so obsessed with, you know, finding out the truth and getting what was right. I think it plays these moments, especially between the two of them, because that's a relationship that has existed, but doesn't always get as big a spotlight as the game goes on. I do think it's cool to see the way that transpires between the two of them here.
Yeah. Yeah, there's it's also just like a really good turnaround, right? Yeah. This whole sort of like Akechi is made as such a nice guy a lot of the times, and he obviously there's hints that he's going to be evil, that he's going to turn, but there's so many little things that, and more that I'll bring up in the future too, because it comes up even more later, that some stuff I want to dig into, and I dug into really early on in a spoiler section of this podcast. But yeah, the Akechi turn is just really well done, and it's really haunting how quickly he goes from, you know, this kind of plucky guy to just like pure evil, like murdering people in cold blood, talking about murdering people in cold blood. It's just like he goes bad very fast.
Like the fact that he can flip that switch is wild at this moment. And I think a thing that like I'm also trying to remember for myself is the first time this happened, I do think, you know, having played through it again now, there is a ton of very obvious signs that Akechi is not just like a morally upright dude. But when you're playing for the first time, you can kind of miss a lot of those, or at least just think, oh, he is just very weird and prim and proper in the way that he presents himself and does he like this mix of caring about the celebrity but pretending like he doesn't, maybe part of it. You know, there's so much you could describe it to, but then you see this switch flip, and then also in his conversation with Shido a little bit later, which we'll get to, but just like the way he very clearly is like, I'm not done being, you know, trying to continue to gain infamy or, you know, whatever he's seeking as a whole. He's not just done after this, or like this wasn't just a one-time thing. This is innately part of who he is.
Yeah. And so the other thing I want to talk about with Akechi really quick is his Confidant line a little bit. We've talked about his Confidant line here and there. This Confidant line is now locked, right? If you haven't leveled him up to rank 8, which is the cap of him at this point, you've missed it, essentially. You should go back and do it, right? If you have the time and the desire.
Yes. But be careful about your distorted desire. Sorry.
Anyway. Yeah, so this is now locked in, so we're going to talk about up through 8 a little bit, and then don't worry about 9 and 10, because those kind of just happen later. I won't get into that now. But if you've gotten to 8 by this point, you're good. And let's talk about 7 and 8, because we've talked about Akechi's confidant line here and there, like of him going to the jazz club, of you going to the playing pool together, or you going to the bathhouse together, and there are all these very like friendly sort of getting to know him, dating him moments, right? And then at the end of his confidant line, it takes a turn, right? Where suddenly it's like 7 is like kind of hostile. And then 8 is literally you go into mementos, and this is spoilers for anybody who wants to go back and play this, just jump ahead a little bit. But in 8, you literally go into mementos and fight him, right? And he says outright to you, I hate you, right? Like, it is... This confidant line, I think, is one of the single best additions to the story of this game, because it fleshes out Akechi in a way that the like, just auto-leveling did not in Persona 5.
No, not even close. Yeah, the experiencing it for the first time, it's funny because you play all those earlier sessions if you've played the game knowing where it's gonna go, and so it's this weird underlying tension of like, boy, we're really getting along and we're very clearly dating and in love, and like we've been saying all that, and I don't think that is, to be clear, obviously we knew where things would go, but I don't think that is wrong to say of those elements. Like, I do still think the way many of those scenes are presented of how close the two of you are, like as you were saying at the end of this all, he says he hates you, but as people say, like, hate and love can often be like very close to each other as someone's feeling, but like I think that is really a case here. Like, I do think there is such fervent emotion toward you, and sometimes Akechi believes it manifests itself as hate. I do think sometimes it manifests itself as love, because we went to a bathhouse together. But I really love the way it escalates there, and I do think the way it lets you see how, very understandably, Joker doesn't know he's being played to a certain extent, but that Akechi is sizing him up this whole time. Yeah. And is very much trying to gain a sense of him.
So the interesting thing I like about this too is that 7, the confidant rank for 7 is you go and play pool, and he uses his offhand again, and then he says you beat him, and he says, I said I'd come at you with everything I have if you beat me with my offhand, and so then 8 is he's like, I told you I was gonna come at you, like, let's go, let's fight.
Yeah, it's not pool again.
So you go into mementos and you fight. And literally even Akechi, this is the only time in Royal that his evilness or his kind of hardcoreness comes through a little before the reveal happens, right? Yeah. Because you have these moments where he's like, let's stop here, because if we went any further, we'd go past the point of no return. And it's like, he's literally saying, like, we'd fight until one of us was dead.
Yep. Yeah. And it then just so much colors the end of the palace. Like, even if you don't know what's going to happen, going into that final fight, I'd be really curious to hear from anyone of like, did you keep Akechi in your party after that if you didn't know what was happening? Because, like, don't get me wrong, I very much feel they have a close relationship, but my God, after that point, I wouldn't want that dude hanging around me during a fight where we are going just crazy with guns and knives and magic. No, thank you.
And Akechi, like, he says he hates you partially. It's really interesting because he, like, was an orphan, right? Mm-hmm. Who grew up with, like, nothing, and, like he just, like, couldn't, like, he had to fight for what he had, and he sees you as, like, more privileged for, like, having friends that he never had, and, like, having these powers also, and, like, how much you've grown so quickly. He's, like, hates you for that, right? Like, he really is, like, heated.
Yeah.
There's also 2 moments. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's very clearly from, like, a deep-rooted issues of his own life that he's dealing with. And I think there is some sort of, like, abandonment issues that come up in terms of, like, the feeling orphaned and everything. He sure could have used a couple therapy sessions with Maruki. Am I right?
Yeah.
That would have been a hell of a day. But yeah.
Yeah. So they, yeah, it would have been interesting to have them talk.
Yeah.
So I really love this confidant line.
Yeah.
Because early on, it lets him just feel like more part of the, like, you get to know him better, very jovial. And then at the end of this line, it so does heavy lifting that wasn't there in terms of making the betrayal feel more potent and making your connection with each other feel more potent and more alive. And I love it.
No, it so more solidifies that moment of, even if he's told you he hates you at this point, like the idea that he would still go through to the point that he does and just straight up murders you.
Yeah.
And does so quickly without remorse. It's like, it really makes you think of this, like, what was this whole relationship then?
Yeah. And so, there are two moments in this. This is something I talked about earlier. There are two moments. There's one dialogue choice in the rank 7 Confidant line, and there's one dialogue choice in the rank 8 Confidant line that, if you say specific things, do have an impact on stuff later in the game. It's not as huge of an impact.
Okay.
It's not as huge of an impact as, like, not hanging out with Maruki.
Yeah.
But there are a couple things that can influence, and I believe what those were like, there's a dialogue in rank 7 where you can say that you're rivals.
Okay.
And you have to, like, say that you're rivals, and then the other one in rank 8, I believe, is like if he says something about like what if we, like, we'll fight again sometime with our full force or something, and you have to say, like, I wouldn't lose or something like that to that. And, like, those two dialogue choices actually have an impact on scenes later. It's, again, not like a huge impact, but I will be interested to see if we did, like, because I know I did them because I looked it up this time because I knew it from last time. I will be interested to see if it turns out you didn't, or if somebody in the comments didn't. We can find how those scenes sort of differ as we go forward a little bit.
I remember you had said this, and I think I purposely went in not looking it up because I did want to see. Cool. Since you had said it wasn't like gating you from playing the DLC, I just wanted to see what it would be like if I answered naturally. I think I might have answered we're rivals, but I don't think I answered the second question.
The not getting him, as far as I remember, not getting him to 8 is more impactful than not making those specific choices within 8.
Okay.
Or within 7 and 8. I don't think it has a huge impact. It's just, like, some things later. Gotcha. Whereas, like, not leveling Maruki is, like, you literally miss the entire end of the game. Yeah. So, yeah. Cool. That's Akechi. I'm really glad we talked about that, because Akechi is great, and we've got more to talk about with Akechi in this next day. So, Sai gets you out of the police station, and essentially this entire November 21st is just talking about what the heck happened. And that's it's everyone in the cafe, with Sai, and with Sojiro. And yeah, the general points being,
I do think it's just worth noting the scene, the way the 20th ends, just because it's pertinent to this. Obviously, we were talking about being in the Velvet Room and, like, the death being a necessity, and we were getting those things back. But then we do, at the end of the day, just quickly also get the jail cell flashback sort of thing of Makoto, Futaba, and Yusuke planning in the room.
Right.
And then we also then get, like, the anime cutscene.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Thank you. Yeah, so there's the anime cutscene where you see all your party members, like, living their normal lives, and then this news report coming on that says that the leader of the Phantom Thieves was caught, and then that the leader of the Phantom Thieves committed suicide in prison, right?
Yeah, and then at the very end of it, we go back to the room, and the shadow of the guard who was killed disappears. And then it cuts back to us just fine in our chair with, like, a little smirk on our face, because
So you already know that, basically.
Yes,
And then, and that cutscene is really good, too, because it's just, like, showing everyone living their lives, and, like, it's very cute.
Yeah, and I think everyone's, obviously, they talk about it the next day, where, like, they all were in on this, and so they all knew what was happening, but I think their authentic reactions to it are still there. Because, like, at most they're acting for the benefit of one or two people who have no idea they could have possibly been Phantom Thieves, so it's not like they have to put up a big show. But it is just, like, emotional reaction to being like, okay, I think the plan is working. And it's really cool seeing how that manifests itself with all of them.
Yeah, Ryuji's smile at the end is great.
It's so good.
Yeah, and you do get more of those memories back, as you were saying, in the Velvet Room. But let's just get into the next day, because the next day we talk about all of this, right?
Yeah.
So, basically, there's a lot of explanation, right? They know that they realized Akechi was evil. They realized they had to stop him. They came up with this plan to use Sai's cognitive version of the police station to have him kill a cognitive version of Joker. They did a bunch of recon work to figure this out. But let's talk about how they knew Akechi was lying.
Yeah, because there's a lot of those other details I do want to talk about, because it did, literally while I was watching, even though it was the second time, like, my girlfriend was watching and brought up a couple questions that I do actually think are pertinent that I was thinking about. In terms of the whole machinations of the plan. But yeah, I think the whole, how we knew Akechi was bad. And it all comes back to pancakes. Yeah.
Pancakes! Let's talk about pancakes.
So, there is one thing I'm just going to straight up, like, say on the show. Tom, do you want to hold your story for the day in case we get a guest who we want on the show, or do you want to tell your story now?
I'm going to tell my side of it.
Okay.
And then maybe we can have him come on and tell the rest of it.
Okay, because I also have my side of it.
Yeah. Let's tell that part of it, because that's our story.
Yeah.
So this pancakes moment, sound off in the comments if you caught the pancakes moment.
Yeah.
Because this is the defining moment of whether you know Akechi is lying from the very beginning, the very first moment you meet him, right?
Yeah.
Is this moment in the TV station way back where Morgana says, let's go to that big pancake-shaped building, talking about Dometown.
Yeah.
And then Akechi rounds the corner a little bit later and says, oh, are you guys getting pancakes? I thought I heard you talking about pancakes. And that means that he heard Morgana, which means he'd been in the metaverse at that point because nobody else said the word pancakes. And if you caught that moment, then kudos to you.
You're Tom.
You didn't...
and if you didn't, you're me.
And if you didn't, you're most people, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
So the story is way back when I first was playing this game, me and my fiance both, I think she mostly caught that moment, but I like also a little bit, I don't remember how exactly it went. She'll be mad at me. Don't worry about it. No, it's fine.
Sound off in the comments about Tom if you're his fiance.
Yeah, exactly. She does listen. She is a listener, so there you go. No, so all I know is I came out of that day convinced that Akechi had been to the metaverse and therefore was the bad guy because I had we'd caught the pancakes moment. And I went to patron saint of the show, Andrew Goldfarb, who at our offices, and I said, Andrew, I think I know something, right? I think I caught something, but I don't want you to tell me if it's true because I want to know for myself if it is, but also I think I caught something that's really exciting. He was, okay, what? And because he was the one who convinced me to play the game. And I went, pancakes. And I explained the situation, and he, with like the best poker face in the world, just goes, oh no, you're imagining things. Like, and I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, no, you're thinking too much into it. And I was like, oh, okay. Huh. And I like... believed him completely.
And then you just went back to playing.
And I went back to playing. And my fiance was like totally sure he was still evil the entire time. And that meant the entire time I was playing, I was waffling. Like I wasn't sure.
Waffling, pancaking again.
And then it comes back to it and he's pancakes. And I'm like, man.
And it was so funny because I was for it's hard to explain, but like the geometry of this conversation is very important too, because the way it was happening was Tom was sort of like directly across from Andrew, so they were facing each other, and then I am directly across from Andrew and sort of slanted to Tom, but between Tom and me was a large column in the like on the floor that was just, you know, holding up the building. So Tom couldn't see me while he was talking.
Yeah.
And as soon as Tom said pancakes, like my jaw dropped because I didn't know it at that point. And I looked over.
You'd already played at that point.
I had already
right?
played, but I didn't know that, like, when I was playing, I didn't clock it at all. And then so I knew to look for Andrew's reaction. And there was, like, the smallest, like, micro twitch of his mouth that was just like, oh, he knows. Crap, I have to hide it. Because he didn't want to ruin it for you. He didn't want the experience dampened. Like, the reason he lied to you was to make sure it was still a fun reveal at the end for you.
Yeah.
And so I was just watching, like, the whole time you were talking, because you were really sure. Like, you kept kind of fighting fighting him a little bit, like obviously friendly, but you were like, are you sure? Because like I think it was this, and watching Andrew's poker face was like the most tense minute of my life, because you were so sure, and watching him have to convince you but not reveal that he knew, but he could see me, I think, out of the corner of his eye being like, oh my god, because I was just freaking out silently in my seat for 2 minutes.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
And he did a great job.
It was very
good. Of
good,
course, the payoff of this was months later when I got to the reveal. And I told you guys, I was like, pancakes!
I think you texted me just like, effing pancakes.
Yeah. And then you sent me a screenshot of your like chat messages with him from that day that you had saved months earlier of you guys being like, oh my god, I can't believe it. Did I do a good job of lying? Like, oh no. Like,
I'm going to try to find it, but yeah, that was...
It was incredible.
It was
that
amazing.
pancakes moment, man, is just like, that was one of the top 10 gaming moments of gaming in that general ever. Oh god,
it's just so good. But yeah, I think whether or not you clock it, I think getting back to this moment, having that reveal, and then seeing the moments throughout the campaign where it is like, you know, at the school festival where he confronts everyone, then he leaves and you have that conversation with Morgana where it's like, okay, yeah, that's not the first time, right? Like we know he seemed too okay with everything, and
right.
Yeah, the way it builds from there.
And then you go from there, right? The way you explain things is you caught him there, you figured out what he was doing, you asked Futaba to hack his phone, right? And so that scene where outside of Sai's palace, the first time she grabs his phone very excitedly, she actually installs this app on his phone to let them listen. You hear dialogue of him talking on the phone, talking about stealing the guard's gun and murdering you, so you know exactly what he's doing. And you form this plan to have Futaba remote activate the app to go into Sai's palace, having her show him the phone so that they're like, she knows they're in the same place at the same time so that she can activate it remotely, send him into the metaverse without realizing it. It'll look normal because it's not distorted there. Then he kills the shadow version and then leaves, and then you get Sai back into and to get you out, right? And so it's this elaborate plan. And they talk about kind of all the ins and outs of how they did it.
February 25th, 2019 at 10:14 p.m. Just all caps, God. Pancakes is all you sent me. And like we had not talked about it for some time, so I appreciated the risk of that text. But yeah, I think the Slack conversation is on our Slacks. But it was just a very funny moment. But just
it was pancakes.
It was so great. But just to go back to what you were saying in terms of like this whole back and forth, especially of Futaba's implementation of the plan, that was a thing a few weeks back. I really made a meal out of how silly I thought her finding his new phone cool was. Mm-hmm. I didn't remember that was part of the plan. I just legitimately thought it was such a silly scene. And just
it's also a very fun one.
But it is very important to the plan, and I did not realize that until I was rewatching it again play out. Yeah. Which was very
fun. They explain the whole thing. Some other kind of important notes, because I don't want to go through every line right here. Some other important notes is that Sai, they didn't change her heart. They knew they weren't going to. That was never part of the plan, right? Yeah. They only used Sai because it had what they needed in terms of like Akechi. They knew Akechi would want to. It was, had this undistorted versions of the palace, of the police station that they could use. Like, that was why they used her heart.
Yeah.
But they didn't change her heart, and the key thing here is that she acknowledges that she was out of control and not acting like herself. So even though they didn't steal her treasure, like, Joker's conversation with her made her come around and kind of realize what she was doing, right? So, like, they did change her heart in, like, non-metaverse ways.
They changed her heart like you would in real life by talking to her.
Yeah, which is, like, I think a really nice moment that they didn't just, like, turn her to get her on their side. Like, they actually, like, she came around on her own.
Yeah. Which
I think is an important sort of thing.
And I think it's also really important because it is to make it a little bit black and white, it is a good person at heart who they didn't get permission from to go into their heart. Like, Futaba wanted them to go do this. Sai didn't know. And so technically you can talk about sort of like the lines of consent that are dealt with here, which we haven't really discussed, but the idea that they just went in and are forcibly changing people's hearts. Granted, doing that to like pedophiles and robbers and all these different people, you know, I understand, but Sai at the end of the day was a good person. I'm losing my voice because I'm so sad.
Yeah. And to that end, the three people, I think there's three people that they see their shadows that are like confidants, right? Which is Futaba, Sai, and Mishima. And they don't actively change any of those people's hearts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Mishima is another case where they go to the shadow and are like, change your own heart. And then he does. And I think that means something in that context.
Totally. But yeah, to your point of like, it's a really interesting note of things that they've learned. I think what this great reveal also does is, as important as it is to Sai's Palace, it is cumulative knowledge that they've gained from all of their excursions. So it's the idea of like, oh yeah, we knew that parts of the metaverse just stayed the same because way back when we first found Kamoshida's, we were just walking through town until we stumbled upon the castle. And they were like, so we had the same thought that obviously around Sai's Palace, things would look pretty normal. So we could use that. Yes.
There's a couple other things, right? Like, what was it? They needed to have him think he killed Joker too, so that they could like, he could pretend to be dead so that he's not seen as a threat to them anymore. On top of that, they couldn't just turn in Akechi, who they know is the real culprit, because they were specifically going after, who was pulling his strings, which they now learn is Shido for sure now. And also they're going to use the fake suicide of like the police saying that he committed suicide so that later when he comes out and says, oh, I'm actually alive, it looks terrible for the police and the government because they now are caught very directly in a lie.
Yeah.
So they thought of like all of this stuff. Right.
These the Scooby gang of clever kids. I do. One other thing that I do think is worth mentioning, because it was a sticking point for both my playing through this moment again and trying to figure it out, is you kind of know this obviously from the beginning of the game, but like what's really interesting is Joker gets caught in the metaverse by the police. Like,
they brought the police in.
Yeah. The idea that like things could just continue to be brought in is rooted in what's happened to them, because they have just had people stumble into the metaverse with them and you know, also intentionally brought people in. So the idea that Akechi could use that element to his advantage to bring the police in was something that also had to be thought through. But
and so that's another big part of it. Then of course when they're figuring out Shido as a name, right, one of my favorite reveals is that Sojiro knows who Shido is, right? And there's this tie-in now with, well, it's like, oh, wow, Sojiro is tied into this in a way we didn't expect too, where it turns out Sojiro, or Shido, was like the guy in the government who shut down Wakaba's research and stole all of it and probably had her killed. And like, he was saying that anybody that gets in Shido's way, he just has killed, which is the whole reason that he's in hiding at LeBlanc, kind of laying low, right? Not like real hiding or whatever, but like is kind of got out of town, so to speak. So suddenly the reason that Sojiro is the way he is because of Shido too, right? Yeah. And so like that's a really cool tie-in.
And I think it makes it so important for like, obviously we've talked about a lot of, I think, and I don't believe our opinions have changed much this playthrough, but like Sojiro's Confidant line is both so good but also so important to keep up with, because learning about him and understanding that wider family is so important. And I think it just adds more to this. But yeah, it really, really solidifies that we have a reason to care about Shido beyond just what happened to Joker, beyond just what's been happening, you know, kind of like behind the scenes, the machinations of the government. Like, we are further doubling down the ideas of how truly awful Shido is.
Yeah. And to further double down that down, we also, during this conversation, get a couple of cutaways to Akechi and Shido, who this is a funny scene to me, or these scenes are very funny to me, because, like, the gang, like, the team has, like, a reason to be explaining their plot, like, their machinations to Sai and Sojiro.
Yeah.
But then you get Akechi and Shido just sort of, like, explaining their plot to themselves in Shido's office, just, like, for the benefit of the viewer, but, like, they're just sort of gloating, right?
Yeah. It's very funny, but yeah.
So they talk about, you know, some of the kind of big things there is that they talk about how they met, right, like 2.5 years ago. Akechi approached Shido when he was just a young politician, basically being like, I have this power, I like your ideals, I can help you do things, right? I can make people who are opposing you go away. Then he only believes it because he knew about Wakaba's research, which is also why he shut down Wakaba's research, because if Akechi has this power and is working for him, then he doesn't want anybody else to learn about the metaverse, so that's why he shut it down. Yeah. So that's like, all of this is relevant, right? It's all tied in. We also get, you know, bits about how Shido and Akechi... Oh my god, I'm totally blanking. This is a lot to juggle.
There's so much that happened.
Oh yeah, we get Akechi caused mental or psychotic breaks of Shido's opponents, and then like solved those as cases. So his whole persona as the like high school detective is all fake because he causes the cases that he ends up solving.
Yeah.
I mean, and Shido says that he's causing all the drama in politics and all the scandals that are happening so that he can take over the government.
Yeah. It's a really great, like, sort of writ large example of the idea of, like, well, how do you become the great-looking person? Do you cause all the problems that you can then solve and do that?
Right.
Like, it's really well done here, and I think further just kind of hammers home this dichotomy to Akechi that we are now fully understanding, but if it's your first time playing, is just all being thrown at you at once.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in.
So we have Shido confirmed as the big bad villain. We have Akechi confirmed as kind of his puppet, but also we have all these tie-ins. I don't think there's anything really major I missed in terms of the stuff they discuss.
Think so. And obviously, if there are points that people want to hear more about, you know, please write in for next week's episode and we can spend some time, I think, definitely checking up with people's thoughts on it. But yeah, I think basically sort of at the end of the Shido Akechi conversation, yeah, he's like, gonna go lay low and focus on my studies, but I'll still be thinking about the future. Yeah. And Shido sort of has this free reign, obviously, just to connect the dots. There's been this underpinning, whether or not you did the Yoshida storyline of just the idea of political importance and the political changes that are going on in Japan right now, and sort of the splintering off of a new political party and whatnot. Obviously, that's more coalescing here with knowing what Shido's been up to and the machinations by which he's done all this.
We get a date, right, that the election is on the 18th, so we have to, like... Basically, we decide Shido has a palace. They look it up. They find the Diet Building is his palace. And so they decide, okay, we're going to change his heart before the 18th. So the deadline's set for the 17th, because otherwise Shido's going to get elected and become prime minister and, like, take over the government and get to do whatever he wants. And that's kind of our next thing. And so it's this week ended on a really nice note. We were talking about it before the show, where, like, okay, Sai's wrapped up. You know, the twist all happened, and now next week we get to dive into the beginning of starting to fight Shido and starting to take down the mastermind behind all of these things that have been happening to the Phantom Thieves. And that's exciting because we're getting into the serious stuff now.
Yeah, it worked out very neatly to be able to sort of focus on that next chapter. But I do think like these 2 to 3 days in particular are obviously some of the biggest of the game. And it's nice to be able to talk about them cohesively rather than having to split it apart. But
can you imagine if like the 20th and the 21st was like split, right?
I know, all because maybe we made a silly date decision 6 months ago. But yeah, I think it's really, really seeing it the second time through, and obviously, you know, your third time through, let me know. But I think it's this is very, very clearly a lot of exposition and a big exposition dump. And, you know, in the grand scheme of how storytelling should be done, typically exposition dumps are pretty poorly looked down upon, even when they are reveals like this. But I do think this has the flavor of almost like a whodunit reveal day or two. And it really, I think, justifies everything it tells you. I don't think anything it took away knowledge-wise from you playing the rest of the game dampens anything that came before it. I think it all makes sense in context. I really like, upon further reflection of the scene, appreciate how much is sort of done and told, even if a lot of it is just like, here's the beat by beat plan we went through, because it's really exciting to find that all out.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was just me
a lot.
saying I like these 2 days a lot.
No, I totally agree. So you now are supposedly dead. You have to lay low. You're going to look into Shido. Sojiro told the school that you had to go home, right? So that's the story right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where we set the stage. You get to like walk around your room after this whole thing and talk to a couple more people, and then at the end, when you go to bed, Morgana has a moment where Morgana says like, you know, oh, that person, that other blip that saved you in the palace when you were escaping was Kasumi, wasn't it? And you're like, yeah. And then he says, okay, well, we can go tell her that you're not dead also.
Yeah.
Basically.
A nice, little agreement to make there. But yeah, no, there's this little point in the room where it's very funny that Futaba and Sojiro and Morgana are just hanging out watching, like, you gonna go to bed soon? Okay, everyone, calm down.
Yeah, and you can talk to them. I don't know how much you talked to Futaba.
She gives you a little bit more information about how she went through things.
She's funny because she basically is just like plot hole filler that you like they didn't want to stick into like the main thing, which I think is very funny.
There's even a moment during the conversation where it's very clear, like, we're going through a lot. I think we need to cut some of this out. Like, that was very clearly, there was an editor who was like, we can't add 20 more minutes to this. Let's just, let's put a little conversation afterward. And so, there's a moment where it's even like, I should ask Futaba about this later.
Yeah, and when you're talking to Futaba, it gives you like 5 opportunities where she's like, do you want to hear more? And you can be like, no!
I'm good.
You can call it at any point.
Yeah.
But that's that. I think let's call it there as well for us, because, man, it's been a week. But we got through it. I'm really glad with everything we talked about, all the different points we touched on. If anybody, like Jonathan said, wants to hear more, let us know. Dornology, youtube.com/Dornology. Leave a comment, or you can send us an email at dornology@gmail.com. I'm at Tom R. Marks on Twitter. He's at JM Dornbush. We'd love to hear from you, because this was a big one, and we've got a whole nother week of plot ahead before we get into the next palace proper.
Yeah. Should be fun.
But let's wrap up the way we always do with some quizzes. Jonathan, do you have one for me?
We went through so much information. Let's try to make you guess information.
Okay.
Yes, I do. I have a Persona pseudonym for you that I'm 99% sure I have not used in the last couple of weeks, but it's been a while.
Okay.
Who is... now I'm thinking maybe I did use this. So you can tell me if I'm wrong. Who's the mountain girl?
You didn't use that.
Good.
Oh, crap. I think I know which one. I think I know one of two which it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think... is this from Size Palace?
Yes.
Still?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I think I know which... it's down to 2.
Well, what are those two?
The 2 are Kikure Hime and Kushinada.
Okay.
And I think Kikure Hime is the pink one and Kushinada is the green one. Therefore, I'm going to go with Kushinada?
You were incorrect.
Ah!
It is Kikuri. Excuse me.
It's Kikure Hime?
Yes. Yeah.
Dang. They're very similar.
They are.
They both have kind of like the Leia ears,
yes,
right? Like the buns on the side.
Yeah, it's two sides of the same coin. I don't blame you for that one, but
dang.
Yeah.
All right, well, I don't feel terrible about that.
No, you should, but it's okay if you don't, I guess.
I literally only went off of green, the color.
Sure, that's fair. Yeah, I get that. But yeah, do you have a pop quiz question for us as well?
I do. So, pop quiz for you all. You can leave your answer all of those places I already mentioned. We mentioned it very briefly. Futaba gives you lots of backstory and more information about the process of what happened. So, in the scheme of your plan and everything that went down, this is the question I have for you, and you can go into as much or as little detail as you want in your answer. What is Operation Tie Him Up? That's the question!
Gotta say, it really does track that these kids have no idea how to name operations. Anyway, yes.
Futaba tells you about Operation Tie Him Up. So the question is, what is that operation?
I dig it. Yeah. Well, Tom.
Also, I'm just excited to talk about Operation Tie Him Up next time, because it's a great, like, literally this is maybe giving hints, but, like, everything Futaba says is basically just, like, as if they sat down with someone and was like, somebody was just like, wait, but why didn't this happen? That doesn't make any sense. And they were like, well, you see,
yes.
And just, like, filled in a gap.
We have a plot hole to fill, yes.
Yeah.
That should be a job on every script. It's just like, how do we fix that problem? Exposition later, I know. But yeah, I'm excited to hear guesses, especially any wrong guesses. But
yeah, wrong guesses are encouraged for this one.
Yeah. Now, Tom, I need to reveal something to you.
Okay.
I've been sabotaging you this whole time. I've never posted an episode of the show. We don't have comments we've been pulling from. I've been writing all those comments. It's all been a one-man play to reveal to you that I hate you.
Oh.
And we need to go fight now. No,
Are you going to throw a glove at me through the computer?
No, Tom, this has been wonderful. I'm very excited we got here, and we still have so much more to talk about.
We do. Yeah. It's wild that there's only, like, 2 months left in this game, right? And, like, it is so much left in this game. It's so much left,
yeah. It really, I guess without spoiling it, we got a lot of JRPG stuff to talk about going forward.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm excited to get into it. I'm really excited to get into some of the Royal stuff, too, because that's going to be fun Uncharted territory for you.
I don't even know. I hope it's fun, but yeah,
Dude, there are some things, again, no spoilers, there are some things I cannot wait for you to see.
I have heard so many good things about this part of the game. So I guess for anyone who's playing along in Royal for the first time, whether you're playing Persona 5 for the first time or not, I am just so excited to get to that stuff because I have only heard good things. Like, it seemed pretty unanimous that the Royal editions in this later part of the game are good.
I do have criticisms, but we will get to those when we get there, and on the whole, it's very, very good.
Yes, yeah, like by and large. Obviously, there may be stuff to dig into, but yeah, like as a whole, it's a good addition.
Well, we'll talk about that when we get there. For now, it's time to go to bed. It's time to fake our own death and see you next week.
If you don't hear from us, it's not because it's Thanksgiving week. It's because of our elaborate schemes.
We're both going to come to next week's episode with hoods and glasses on.
Do you know who this is? Who are these two hosts? Who could have predicted?
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the show, give a thumbs up or a review or whatever. We really appreciate it. We just enjoy doing it. We enjoy hearing from you. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you next time.